What was the last thing we looked up on stream? What happened? I feel like we were doing something here 2 or 3 days ago, but I don't even remember. Oh, I was just coming back from that fresh and fit stuff. Oh, watching Rolo literally
Rolo.
self-destruct on the internet. Holy shit.
He was what a goober. What a goober.
What was he thinking? I'm so confused.
Nah, you know what's most telling about that whole conversation? How hard Fresh and Fit were sucking him off. That was crazy.
I think that's probably the
At
time.
one point, Fresh said something that almost killed me. He went, "Why are you guys being so mean?" I said, "So, right now, just jump off the highest building in Miami. So, you guys have never given a shit about being mean to these."
Yeah, that's
and
why I
all
kind
of
of
a
like.
sudden, it's a 55-year-old white man yelling, what did he call you guys?
Oh wait, douche nozzles.
Okay. And all of a sudden, you guys, bro. So that's why these dudes, they're going to have the craziest energy for ladies, but if it's a dude, all of a sudden they turn to bitches, bro.
Yeah.
That was crazy. I couldn't believe he said that. Why are you being so mean? Oh, my.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, I think I was like, it's very hard. I have to try to keep like my emotions in check so I'm not like losing my mind. But I was so triggered because I watched him do the whatever podcast, and then I've watched these guys like and how they like run through, verbally, not fuckingly, but like how they like will run through all these girls on these programs like screaming and shouting at him, and then when I finally get this guy in front of me, like he falls apart instantly, and it's like the most pathetic display I've ever seen in my entire life, and I'm like, is this is what you guys do? Like you just shit on like women that aren't ready to debate you all day long, and then as soon as like somebody even mildly competent comes on, because it's not even like we're doing hard topics, right? This is like the easiest shit in the world. What is a high value man? That should be like, you should be able to spit like 20 paragraphs of that for us, and like this is all it takes to like set you off. It triggered me so hard. What a loser.
I will say in his defense, I did look up whether or not he ever talked about it before, and he does repeat the same nonsense every time he's brought up on this topic. So it wasn't like he showed up on that podcast specifically and started fumbling his words. He always says the same shit everywhere else he goes. So.
Sure, but the issue is that like the problem is that one, he made a list of suggestions for how to become a high value man. So it doesn't make sense that he's saying that like, well, it can be whatever you want it to be if he's telling you specific steps to be that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think he's trying to do the thing where he's both considerate of the fact that people might have different definitions for high value man, and also not realizing that all his advice does lead towards a certain type of high value man. So there's a bit of an incongruence between what he's saying and what he's trying to get at.
Yeah.
Because I understood the idea of it. There is some truth to the idea that
Well,
high value man has some variations from place to place or from value system to value system. I think he did a poor job of eloquating that. And also he got too harped on that to say like, okay, even though there is some variation, there's still a general consensus for the most part. Well respected within the community, generally higher up on the hierarchy due to either fitness, money, whatever it is. So like, you know, I think there's like ways he could have got that across without sounding so autistic.
Yeah, and that's like, because I was willing to be good faith-ish, but I didn't know that we were going to run into issues that early on. And I disagree actually. I don't think that's what happened. That he was like trying to be fair in how he defined it. I think what happened to him, and I know this because I've been there before. I think what happened was he made a really retarded tweet and he couldn't get off of it, so he had to like warp his mind in the most retarded possible to try to make that tweet make sense. So he was like, okay, well, high value man. But as soon as he starts saying shit like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and whoever else like aren't high value men, I was like, bro, well, what do you mean? What is a high value man then, right? Like you must have a definition in your head if you're saying these people aren't high value men. But yeah, it was just cringe.
I think that was probably one of the dumbest parts when he said Ben Shapiro was not.
Yeah.
Why? And he said something so strange. He said like Ben Shapiro basically hounded his wife into submission.
Yeah, he kept saying that he wore her down. He said that like 3 or 4 times. He wore her down over 4 months.
Courted her. Like, you know, Ben Shapiro's story, I actually looked it up. It's kind of wholesome. No homo. He basically just...
Well, we say pause now. But go ahead.
Yeah. I say both. But yeah, when they met, they decided to spend every day after work together. Like hanging out, doing work, not even like going on dates necessarily, but maybe she would be studying for a paper and he'd be writing up an article and they would just spend time together. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of beautiful. Like they really enjoyed each other's company and they were committed. And then after 4 months of spending time together, they decided to get married, which by serious Jewish people is very common. It's not abnormal to accelerate the timeline for a marriage. So why did you get this idea that he hounded her? And you just realize he's working backwards because he hates him.
Yeah, of course.
He's gonna view whatever behavior he engaged in the most negative light. But like, I'm like, where did you get the idea that he hounded her?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was like wondering. I was like, was there really like some weird improper shit going on, or was this just like a normal kind of like courting relationship where, you know, guy's pursuing girl and then he's, you know, persistent until she finally says yes, which can either be like really creepy or it can be totally fine, but like you need a little bit more context. But the way that he was presenting it basically was trying to make him sound like he was a
yeah. What was it?
Jesus.
Yeah, he probably about to get murdered. But I was going to ask you, how do you, considering like even the Tate brothers are calling the red pill you're autistic and don't want to be associated with that, and then even seeing Sneako's completely shift on a lot of the ideas the red pillar's been saying, do you feel like, and then Rolo having his collapse, do you feel like the red pill's losing a lot of its steam?
Well, I said that a while ago that I felt like it was, but I feel like I might have been wrong. But now I feel like I'm gonna end up being right for reasons I shouldn't have been, because it feels like that Rolo tweet was actually a bigger deal than I thought it would be. I think because of him defending it, and then other red pillars, namely Fresh and Fit, feeling like they have to defend it, but the tweet being so obviously right. Like, it's the equivalent of, like, Rolo, like, tweeting out, like, how to be a high-value man, step 1, all white people should be able to say the N-word. Like, it's on that level of stupidity. And I think that one of the things that it did, and this is something I've talked about for a while, is, I don't know if I've had this talk with you, but I've said that, like, if you watch the Tristan videos on, like, how to pick women up, and if you listen to Andrew Tate talk about how to pick women up, it is very obvious that he knows what he's talking about, that these guys have a lot of experience with women, and they definitely know how to play the game. But if you listen to a lot of red pillars talk about women, they don't. They're just, this is like virgin tips for virgins. Like, that some of this shit about like the juggling all the women and blah, 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 like it's just cringe as so kind of one of the things that I wonder is, if that Rolo tweet was basically kind of like pushing everything over the edge to show that, like, okay, the red pill stuff and the Andrew Tate stuff is not the same. A lot of this red pill stuff is super corny, and now you're going to see a huge schism as people try to like find their bearings of like who do they follow post, you know, Tate collapse, I guess, of not backing the red pill shit up anymore. And Sneeko collapsed too, right? Because he's, love him or hate him, he's still probably like a decently big figure in that space, right?
I suspect that when I saw the red pill growing, one of the most cringiest parts is finding all these like hyper religious people who had gotten into it. Mm-hmm. In my head, I'm like, this whole ideology is antithetical to.
Yeah. Oh, that too is probably a hard thing to deal with. Yeah.
I think that because that's how a lot of their fan base grew. Like all of a sudden, I saw seeing like a bunch of Muslims just fawning over this kind of content, and I'm like, you guys really feel like this movement is congruent to like your religious values? Mm-hmm. And I suspect that when this whole vasectomy thing happened and like pretty much like, hey guys, give up your ability to have kids and have a family, which is core to a lot of religious cultures. I think a lot of people started to realize there's an issue there, and it became very incongruent with the religion, and that became obvious to a lot of people. So I think that's also a big part of it. And I think that's also why you saw Ben Shapiro and a bunch of other conservative people responding to that tweet. It's like, oh wait, no, you are now with like our religious values when you're espousing this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And it gave them a really easy way probably to separate themselves from that movement too, right? Because like for as much as people love like Tates and shit, like they are pretty toxic to be like associated with. So having like a clear delineation between like, oh, hold on, these are the red pill guys and this is us, we're real conservatives, especially as the Daily Wearers, I think, tried to set themselves apart from that. It was probably really nice too. So yeah, Rolo just gave like the perfect like inciting moment for everybody to kind of like start to break away. And then, like I said, you saw it too. Like, oh my god, like watching Myra like try so hard to defend Rolo's stupid statements on that show was so sad.
I think he didn't know. I think he doesn't know how reversible vasectomies are. I think there's a lot of people who overestimate how reversible vasectomies are. They think it's just like a quick surgery you do, and anytime you want, you can get it undone. And so I think they just said a bunch of stupid stuff, and then once you guys had told them that they were wrong, they just didn't want to admit it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think if you ask most people, like, oh, vasectomies, are they like reversible? Most people think they are, because that's what even I'd heard that many times before. It wasn't actually until that podcast that I found out, like, oh, it's actually not reversible.
Yeah, or as time goes on, yeah, they're definitely, it gets worse and worse. And like, even if they're like generally reversible, like let's say they're 90% reversible, you've just sterilized 10% of your audience. Like, what the?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember at one point, I think you guys said after 10 years, like the odds of you reversing it are 30%.
Something like that. Yeah, I've read a lot of different numbers, but yeah.
Yeah, and then I think Myro said something like, "Well, that's fine. You can just do it for 5 years." And I started laughing. You're like, okay, so like, when do you start? When do you start? You want to start at like 19 and then stop at 25?
Yeah, that's what me and Sig were bringing up. Like 25, that's when you're gonna be a high value man. Like that's when you've got all this shit like taken care of. Like, come on.
And what about all the you did before 25? What all the women you got pregnant there? Like, how do you gonna save that shit?
Yeah, and I thought that like I thought the whole point was that like men don't have any value early in life, right? Like if you're a man and you're under a grind and all that shit, like are you even that much from 19 to 25 if you're like doing all this stuff to be like hardcore grind setting?
Hey, people always find time. You know, one part that made me laugh a lot too is I think you were talking and then Fresh was like, I agree with you. You're like, no, you don't. I just said the complete opposite of what you just said.
I hate it when people do that shit. When they're like, oh, I think we mostly agree. I'm like, no, we don't agree. Why are you saying that? It actually triggers me so much. I start calling people on that. I'm like, no, we don't agree. I just said the opposite of what you said. Don't say we agree. I hate that.
Hey, listen, I'm not going to go too hard on those guys, but honestly, Fresh was embarrassing in that whole discussion. I didn't know what this guy was talking about. He kept trying to, I felt like he kept trying to smooth things over whilst also trying to make Rolo sound reasonable. And you guys were just like, nah, we don't agree. We don't agree. Rolo's being ridiculous. And you guys were simping really hard because his book is on the table. I was like, yeah, get him, dudes, get him.
Yeah.
That's good, though. I'm glad you guys had it. Are you going to do another debate with Rolo when he comes down?
Yeah, I think Myron just texted me and confirmed it for Monday. So I'll be doing that Monday, and then Tuesday I'm on the Whatever podcast. So, oh boy.
Have you read his book?
No.
You're not going to prepare for the thing by reading his book at all?
I mean, like, I've listened to him talk enough, and hopefully I'm not going to have a Vosh moment here. But then also, like, we had that conversation. Not to sound mean, but he doesn't seem like a very bright guy. Like, I'm not that worried, but...
Apparently his book is really insightful and good. You're not even going to give it a shot, or at least one of them?
The problem is if it is insightful or good, it's probably because it contains a bunch of really basic shit that, like, we're going to agree with, but that, like, it's not worth, like, pointing out. Like, if it's going to be some shit like, women are generally more attractive in their youth and men gain value as they age, like, to some extent, of course I'm going to agree with that, right?
Right.
But my issues are going to be with the more insanely stupid shit that he says.
Basically, for you, you're basically saying, like, it's not worth the research because, like, the odds of it being relevant to the discussion or there being anything of value to add is, like, not very high, so you're not going to bother wasting the time.
Yeah.
Have you ever read somebody's books in preparation for debate?
Yeah, I read Lauren Southern's book on immigration.
Why'd you laugh before saying that?
Because it was reading that book was, as soon as she realized I'd read it, I had spent so much time preparing for an immigration debate with her. This was like 7 years ago, and as soon as she realized I'd read it, she completely changed the topic. And I was like, okay, well, this was a waste of time.
You should have just come in with quotes. You'd be like, chapter 3, line 47. And you should have started rattling shit off. That would have been funny. Was the book good?
I mean, it was cute, I guess. It was like a 60-page, like, very, like, immigration is bad. Yeah.
Is that even a book? That's a pamphlet, bro.
I mean, isn't that basically Myron's book?
Is his book 60 pages too?
I think so, yeah.
Yo, that title made me laugh. Why Women Deserve Less.
Yeah.
Hey. That's a funny title. I can't believe. Hey, listen, at least he's consistent with that nonsense.
Sure.
That's funny.
All right, bye.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.